in order for me to really be fulfilled, I need to be creating. Like that is a kind of a part of my DNA. And so like how could I create in a way that is aligned with right my values? And so basically came, I guess, full circle back to, okay, I want to do tech, but I want to do it from a place of, like contribution. I want to do it from a place of the things that I care about. And at that point, it was very clear, like psychology, this personal development path, well-being, helping people be their best self and improve their relationship with themselves. This whole process that I had gone through,
Yeah.
it was something that I wanted to help facilitate for others as much as I could. And my question became, what is actually technology's role in that? Can technology play a role in that or not?
Welcome back to What Comes After. I'm your host, Janet Lee. Today's guest is Sean Dadashi. He comes from a unique background in both cognitive science and computer science, and actually started his career as a product manager in a startup world. But along the way, his personal mental health journey inspired him to shift gears and explore the intersection of wellness and technology. That path led him to launch a few startups in the space, and today he's the co-founder of Rosebud, an AI startup on a mission to make self-growth and mentorship more accessible and affordable. Welcome to the show, Sean. So good to have you. How's it going?
Good to be here.
Thanks so much for your time. I usually take my guest speaker kind of way in the beginning just to set context. Anything to share?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Orange County in Southern California. I grew up to parents that were immigrants from Iran. They came after the revolution happened in Iran in 79. And I think a sort of prominent feature of my childhood was having a different culture at home than I had in my school life. My
Mm.
parents sent me to a Christian school. When I grew up in a pretty small town ish. I mean, I guess it's not a town, but not a huge place. And my school had like 25 people per class, so it was very small,
Wow.
and K through 12.
Do you feel like looking back, you've predicted entrepreneurship for yourself? Like, what was your childhood dream job?
Like I really didn't know what I wanted to do. The only thing I really knew was that I wanted to work like either for myself or on things that I was passionate about, I guess. Like I wanted the autonomy.
Mm,
That's the only thing I really knew.
mm,
Um, so yeah, I think it was maybe a source of anxiety for my parents. Like, what does he actually want to do? All that kind of stuff. But and I mean, it was a source of maybe anxiety for me as well. Like, I didn't have a clear path,
mhm.
um, and yeah, it was a winding journey to sort of figure it out. I think I was always kind of independent, and I gained a lot of independence early in my life when, especially when my parents got divorced around when I was 13 years old. So it
Mhm.
was right at that transition before high school.
Yeah.
And in high school, in my early years, I went through a really big shift where I had, a period of depression. Um, and then on the other side of that, really found a strong like sense of self and a personal practice, and I began meditating at that time, and ended up switching schools at that time, and really kind of took ownership over my life in a way that I hadn't before. um, and I think my parents saw that and were like, okay, Sean knows what he's doing. What he does is different than what other people do, but he's not being irresponsible. He is like trying to find his path. So I think that sort of continued in college a little bit. If I didn't get great grades, then they'd be worried. But yeah.
Amazing. Um, and so what happens after?
Yeah. Well, So while I was at Cal, I was studying cognitive science, and I was also doing a minor in computer science. And one of my cousins had recently started a business in Austin, Texas,
Mm.
and I visited Austin one time to just visit family there and see him, and essentially saw his business, and he showed me around, and then I was like, oh, I have ideas for how I could help you. Um, like there's software that I think could be built to help your business. And he's like, oh, really? And so I went back, started working on some things, and um, and made something that ended up helping, increase like revenue and sales and all that sort of stuff. And then he was like, oh, would you want to like work more for me, right? And I was like, sure. So started doing that, and the company, grew very quickly. We went from, just like a handful of employees to 33 employees within the course of a couple of years. And it was a great experience of being in an environment where something's growing really quickly. And then unfortunately, due to some issues and mismanagement and things like that, the business ended up stalling, and we had to uh and it ended up shrinking, actually. So it was a sort of meteoric rise and meteoric fall.
Mm.
um and after that experience, I ended up in a place where I was going through a few different transitions in a pretty brief period of time, where that business failed. I had started a relationship that ended, and shortly, this was after the business had failed, I had moved to San Francisco as well. And so I was going through a confluence of transitions all at once. And that was probably the hardest period of my 20s, but
Mm.
also what led to the most growth, and why I'm working on Rosebud today.
Yeah. How did you stay grounded, if at all, during all this uncertainty?
Mm. Um, I mean,
Or maybe not?
pain, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really was. I mean, journaling was actually one practice that I had, and I've journaled. I've been like a emotional processing journaler since I was young.
What does that mean?
Like, what I mean by that is, like, I wasn't a daily journaler. Like, dear diary, this is what I did today, right? And that wasn't me. I was like, if you go look at my journals, and I've journaled since I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11. They're usually always like me in being really sad or upset about something,
Mm.
and just writing about it.
Big
Um,
emotion.
big emotions. There's like rare cases here and there where I had like a big insight, a revelation about something, and then I started writing about that.
Mm.
Um, so it's either, I feel like it's one of the extremes is usually what gets captured in my had gotten captured in my journals. And so yeah, journaling was one practice. I had my meditation practice, which came and went throughout my life, and I was doing that. Really, like, there was a slew of practices that I discovered during this period that changed everything for me, I would say. And yeah, I'm happy to elaborate on what those are.
Yeah, I would love to learn.
Yeah, so one of the big ones was men's groups. So I was very fortunate to be in San Francisco, where men's groups were pretty popular, and I joined one. For folks who don't know, men's groups are um, a group where guys get together and talk about what they're feeling. And I think up until that point in my life, I had been pretty guarded with my true vulnerability. Like, it wasn't something that I would share with somebody. And that experience helped me understand the value of being vulnerable, and not, wearing a mask and pretending like, things are fine and whatever it is, right? That was a huge, huge, huge experience for me. And I still participate in men's groups to this day. Have a men's group here in LA. We meet once a month, and it's an important sort of practice for me. Another one that I really got into more around that time was just embodied practices. So I think, as a culture, we tend to live so much in our brains and in our minds. And most people don't realize, and I didn't fully realize until then, that, for every corresponding thought, usually there's some kind of emotion, and that emotion is going to take place somewhere in the body, or you're going to be able to experience it somewhere in the body. And just creating that link, that awareness between thought, emotion, right, mind and body was something that was a big practice of mine during that time. And I had a couple different practices that I would do that helped me. One was just like a dancing practice. Yeah, I actually really like dancing.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
And, just sort of expressing oneself through movement doesn't have to look any kind of way. You call it a dance, but it's basically just like feel what is happening in, my body and express it through movement. And so that was a big practice. And another one was like a qigong kind of practice, which is like about getting in touch with the body, and, and there's certain like grounding movements and exercises that can be done through that.
You were a scholar.
I was.
You were studying. You were going through the process of self-understanding. How would you describe it? Self-understanding, self-awareness,
Yeah,
growth.
I mean, I think that's one thing. Like, if I'm interested in something, I'll read about it. When I was 15, 16, and I was going through depression, I found books online that were from different, like, spiritual teachers, philosophy folks. And I just went and bought those books and started reading them. And that's how I got introduced to meditation, was in a book. Literally, this guy named Jiddu Krishnamurti was describing meditation in one of his books. And so I like read it, I sat down and I followed it. And then that was it. I started meditating. And so at this time, so many years later, where I was going through all these transitions, it was probably the deepest pain that I'd ever had in my life, and I had complete loss of like self and identity, and I didn't even know what I was doing or where I was going to go next. But I did know that the relationship that I had with myself wasn't helping me.
What does that mean?
It means that the ways that I was talking to myself, the beliefs that I had, right, the behaviors that would come from those thoughts and beliefs, I realized that, hey, I wasn't my own best friend. And actually, I was probably hurting myself. Like, it wasn't helping me. And at that point, I realized, like, I need to really pay attention and do something about this now, because if I don't do something about this now, it's like I may not get through this, and it's, like I need to deal with it. And so therapy had been something that I'd sort of put off for a long time up until this point. And then at this point I was like, okay, I need to do therapy. I need to dig into this. And I had, at a younger age, really been interested in the kind of, meditation, spirituality, all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't into dealing with my own shit. And at this point I was like, I really need to deal with my own shit. And I could tell that I was sweeping stuff under the rug. So yeah, that was sort of a wake up call for me. And I just put all of my energy and force behind it. Like, started therapy, was journaling almost every single day, joined 2 men's groups, was doing dance, qigong, going to anything that I could find, like Buddhist center, uh, anything to just like, do this work. And yeah, I was reading tons of books by different psychologists and things like that, and personal growth folks. And that year was probably the most growthful year of my life, to be honest. So yeah, I went from being in a place of like absolute despair to feeling like, the most expanded, expressed version of myself within a year. So that was great. I'm really grateful that I had that period.
That's a beautiful, beautiful experience. Do you now notice in others that may be on the precipice of going on that journey, but maybe they take it a little bit longer, delay it a little bit longer? Maybe we'll try something else. Like, do you kind of notice that in your circles or people that you interact with? And do you have anything that you can share about having the courage to really gain self awareness, even though it could also be a moment of darkness that you'd have to go through before you get to the other side of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think when you're in that state, you kind of have to do the work, otherwise you don't get out of it, right? So I think there's a like, and I don't want to compare being necessarily depressed to being an addict, but in terms of like when the situation is more dire, when the situation is more acute, right? You either have to figure it out or it's like sink or swim, basically. And if it's less that way, you can have all these sort of coping strategies that maybe have an impact on you more long term, right? They impact your relationships, they impact your health, they impact, there's these subtle impacts that they take a long time before you really realize what happened. Or maybe it's just you don't live a satisfying life and you figure that out, 15, 20 years later, and then you're looking in the mirror wondering what happened, right? And questioning all the choices that have been made. So I think there's, as bad as it is in the moment, there's sometimes a benefit to being in a more acute position, because it forces you to deal with stuff. And I think for a lot of people, not in that acute position, things are good enough, right? And the pain isn't high enough to come out. There's a great quote by Anais Nin,
Mhm.
uh, which is like, and one day the pain that it took to remain in the bud was greater than the pain that it took to blossom, right? And I think the thing to pay attention to is just noticing these little areas where things don't feel aligned, these little nagging, you know, things, because I know that I've been in periods like that. And there's these little nagging things that kind of like tick at the back of your head, um, or at your heart. And you're like, it doesn't feel quite right, but it's okay. It doesn't feel quite right, but it's okay. And I think life is like a process of trusting your intuition and feeling fully expressed as a being on this earth. And so, listen to that and understand that, hey, that thing probably isn't going to go away. And there's probably something there, and maybe try to understand what that is. It doesn't necessarily need to lead to a huge shift in life, but it's worth exploring and trying to create greater awareness around.
Yeah. And maybe people have to be reminded that you can relapse. Like you can have this huge momentum and progress, and you might come back to a similar situation. And that doesn't mean all of that progress is wasted.
No, not at all. I think that was the one thing when I was 16, I started meditating, I started doing all this stuff. I was like, oh my God, I'm like enlightened. I figured it out, and, I think each time, right, like the growth journey is really, it's more like a spiral. You kind of go back to the same places and have to relearn the same lessons over and over again. And so, yeah, it's definitely not a linear path. And, something is to just, I think actually one of the like wisest things that I've ever done for myself is just to be accepting of that. Like at the point that I became accepting of, hey, I'm going to regress, it actually makes everything a lot easier. And it's like another level of like sort of serenity gets unlocked at that point.
Mm. Serenity is a beautiful word because I think oftentimes we probably don't feel it and always chase it, even though we don't think that's the ultimate goal.
Hmm.
How do you think about serenity versus happiness? And I think a lot of our society really emphasizes happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think happiness, joy, I think about serenity and acceptance as just being right at peace with oneself and the world, and also being able to see things clearly.
Mm,
I think a lot of times in like states of elation, happiness, joy, right? We they're great states, but they're not as stable, right? You can never be happy all the time, obviously, right? And I think that was like a farce or a myth that I had when I was younger, is like, oh, I'm going to get to this state of being and everything's, I'm always going to be happy and joyful and all that kind of stuff. But life is about the lows as well as the highs, right? You have to have both in order to have an experience. And if you didn't, life would honestly be boring. It would be one note, right? You can't listen to a song that just plays the same note, right? It's not a song at that point anymore, right? It's just a sound.
mhm.
Um, so life is a lot like a song. It goes up, it goes down, it has peaks and troughs and valleys and different experiences, um, and I'm grateful for that, because that means that I'm having this experience. And if it wasn't, I'd probably get bored. So, the variety is the spice of life, as they say.
Yes. And so while this shift is happening internally, what is happening externally? And how are you thinking about what's next for you in terms of career?
Yeah. So at first I was emboldened, and, I was like, I'm interested in, uh, I still had this mentality of like, hey, I need to start something. I have this, I've been on a train track for my whole upbringing, right? To like continue to perform and do stuff, right? And um, so that continued. Um, and I started to explore things at the intersection of tech and well being. And then as I was going through the process of exploring those things and going on my own personal growth journey, I actually realized that the thing that I really needed was to stop. And it was very uncomfortable. But that period allowed me to really integrate a lot of the things that I had learned from the growth process, right? Like, go through a period where you're just growing so quickly and rapidly and getting exposed to so many new things. You kind of need to let the stew simmer
Mhm.
and, right, congeal and mix after that, right, for it to really form.
Deepen the
Um,
flavor.
yeah, exactly. So that time really allowed me to do that, without like trying to work. And then I knew like the patterns would come back, because a lot of my personal patterns were related to my relationship to achievement as well. And so after that, and in that period of pausing, I actually considered not doing tech. It was actually a pretty heavy consideration for me. Was, hey, I don't know if tech's right for me. I don't know if it actually aligns with, my values, who I want to be, all that kind of stuff. And so I considered becoming a therapist. I was looking at programs there. I considered a bunch of different things. Eventually, what I realized was, even in the process of not doing work, I still, like, I didn't work for a few months, and then, more time went by, and I still had this desire to create things.
Mm.
This innate desire that I have to create stuff has been there from very early in my life. And I think a lot of that I can attribute to my father, who is an architect and a builder. And, he used to sit me down when I was young. He was young too. And we would draw things together. He's great at drawing, and we would just draw things together. And I just loved drawing things. And then, you know, seeing something come to life, right?
Mhm.
Having an idea and right, seeing it come like manifest in the world. It was a really like exciting thing for me.
Yes.
Um, and so I felt like I connected to that energy again, where the creation wasn't necessarily about like, oh, I need to achieve this or whatever. It was just like creating things because you feel excited about something and as a way to contribute to your community, right? So I started creating tech things for just like the friends that I had around, right? And the community that I was in. And it felt great to be able to be of service in that way to create something, right? It's connecting, right? It was meeting a lot of needs for me, and I realized, okay, like in order for me to really be fulfilled, I need to be creating. Like that is a kind of a part of my DNA, and so like how could I create in a way that is aligned with right my values, and so basically came I guess full circle back to okay, I want to do tech, but I want to do it from a place of like contribution. I want to do it from a place of the things that I care about. And at that point, it was very clear like psychology, this personal development path, well being, helping people be their best self and improve their relationship with themselves. This whole process that I had gone through,
Yeah.
it was something that I wanted to help facilitate for others as much as I could. And my question became, what is actually technology's role in that? Can technology play a role in that or not? And starting to explore that.
Yes. I know a lot of people out there these days have a hard time pausing. And it sounded like you really needed that time to get to that clarity faster. Like, what was your state then? And what would you tell others that are so fearful of perhaps maybe taking a moment, maybe not a few months, but even taking a breather to assess what's happening here?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know how long it was going to be, but I was like, I'm going to give myself a month. Right. And I kind of kept reassessing over like every month, basically. But it was challenging for me. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was extremely challenging to do on some level, but also deeply nourishing on another level. Right. And I think, yeah, I'm extremely grateful for that period because it allowed me to connect to who I was as a human being outside of work. And I think if I had never done that, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And I
Mm.
think that's really important, especially now as, we're growing Rosebud and as being a founder again, it's so crazy. I often bring myself back to that period and like the lessons and things that I learned during that period as a way of helping me stay grounded to just being a person and not being somebody who's, you know, a founder creating something and this whole thing that we get caught up with in the world of like our production and you know yeah just it's very easy to get caught up in that, especially in the United States, especially in cities. But I think there is a base foundational experience of being human that is outside of that, and that pause allowed me to connect with that, and I think it was important for me.
Mm. And so, if I remember this correctly, Sean, this was pre-pandemic. You get this
It
epiphany,
was.
you get this epiphany moment, and then pandemic hits, and then what?
Well, I had just started working on something with my current co-founder right before the pandemic hit, like literally right before. So I came back to the States, was doing a little consulting for a little bit, and then kind of thinking about, what exactly do I want to do next? Reconnected with an old friend that I met in San Francisco, who actually met in one of those two men's groups that I joined
Oh, okay.
that point, and he had moved to Los Angeles around the time that I moved to, or that I went to Bali, and had just left a position that he was in, and was kind of thinking about what to do next. And he had a background in social apps and was working on a social app at that time. And my background was right more in sort of this well-being personal growth space. So he actually suggested, oh, what about like social well-being, right? Something that is around social and is healthy. And I was like intrigued by that. And so we started exploring things in that space. And then the pandemic hit. And yeah, we were in lockdown and working on a startup at the same time. We had some interesting things that we explored. We were exploring like what would a social app that connected you with people that you're closest to look like a more intimate social app where it encourages more vulnerable, authentic sharing rather than the more performative, superficial stuff
Like
that
an
gets
outfit.
shared. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we were like, is that something that would be possible? So we were exploring some things. There were some interesting ideas, but we never quite, got there in terms of launching. And there was a lot of perfectionism that we had, and so there was a lot of learnings, right? And there was many failures, trials, tribulations through that period. That you know, it was really only through that process that I think we've been able to come to a place where we've learned from those mistakes and are applying the wisdom that we've gained to Rosebud.
Wonderful. Take us through the journey of Rosebud. I'm so curious to learn what it is.
Yeah, so Rosebud, put simply, is an interactive journal that uses AI to help you be your best self. So that's how I would put it. And essentially, we use AI to help, ask really insightful follow-up questions and provide insight based off of what you've journaled about in the past. It tries to help you understand more about yourself, and the goal is to help you navigate life, understand your values, and just be the best version of yourself that you can be. And I say, in the process, like I said, we learned a lot of lessons, and one of the big ones was to lean against perfectionism. Um, and so we, built a very quick and dirty version of a Rosebud within just like 2 to 3 weeks. And we launched it and started to get feedback immediately from people.
Mm.
And I think that's one thing, is like, if people are willing to use something that is really, really like crappy, right? By your
MVP.
standards, MVP,
Uh-huh.
right? Then it's a good sign that you found something that is valuable,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's like, for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur out there, that's like probably one of the bigger mistakes that I see people make. And I made this mistake many times, is you have this grand vision and you're like, it needs to be this grand thing before I'm ready to ship it. But at that point, you're not really making it for an audience, you're making it for yourself.
Hmm.
That's my hot take on that.
Hmm.
There's a great quote that says, like, art is a conversation between the artist and the audience. And it's the same thing here. There's no grand idea that anybody's going to have that is going to be perfect, like perfectly fit reality and what people actually need. So the best thing that you can do is actually get something out there as quickly as possible and start iterating on it with real people's feedback. And I know, all the startup books and things talk about this, but I still see it as like, it is a common mistake that I see with friends and folks who are starting things and come ask me for advice. So yeah, I guess the aha moment was just, hey, like, this is interesting. People are using it. People are saying that it's helping them. And it's something that's very simple. Right.
Mm.
And so that was kind of, the recognition that, okay, we might have something here. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey since then.
Yes. And since then, you've raised a seed round for the startup, you're expanding your team. How does the evolution feel like for you? And if you're to kind of look back at Sean, who's journaling on his own, what is the fundamental differences in the experience now?
Mm. Yeah. So, right, going back to Sean, who was, you know, like I said, I'm like an emotional journaler. Um,
Aren't we
there's
all?
there's a lot of, right. I'm also a ruminator, which uh, goes with that, Journaling can be helpful, but it could also potentially not be ultimately helpful where, you can be going journaling about something and maybe upset about something or trying to figure something out. And you don't have the benefit of like an outside perspective, I guess, on that. So it can be really easy to ruminate. And then there's nothing to catch you and be like, oh, well, maybe there's this other perspective here that
Mhm.
you could consider. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think that's one of the big values of Rosebud is just having that different perspective. And it's not going to come in with like an opinion or anything like that. That's not how we've programmed it. It's there to help you understand more aspects of, what you're talking about and understand more about your experience, right? Get into the emotions of it or, right, help you consider things that you might not have considered. And the other thing that's really helpful about Rosebud is that it learns about you over time. So it's able to connect dots where you might not connect dots. Sometimes we like to think of our personal life as different than our work life, right? But really, everything is interconnected. The patterns that show up in personal life also show up in work. Rosebud is good at helping just, maybe create a little note to help create awareness for those patterns.
Yes. I noticed that as career development executive coach too. Just understanding the interplay between personal and professional. I think I'm kind of an emotional journaler too, in a way, Sean. And one of the biggest demotivating factor is I would love to be consistent, but I cannot be a consistent journaler. Do you notice that trend with your customers? How do you really defy that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think sometimes the thing is just like creating right, like habit stacking, basically, right? Creating a routine, first thing in the morning, right? Last thing before going to bed, things like that definitely can help make it more consistent, reducing the friction as much as possible, and then having like a clear intention for why you want to do it.
Mhm.
Um, I think those sorts of things can help carry through, but I don't think there's a right or wrong way necessarily to do this. And if there's not intrinsic motivation to do it, you know, then don't do it until there is.
Yes.
Um, and, yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, but I'd be curious if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, I think it's something I think about, but going back to the acuteness, I think that's the
Hmm.
theme that I notice with a lot of people that I support as well. What feels like a painkiller versus what feels like vitamin. And I would hope that once the pain resolves, you're able to see the benefits of integrating vitamins into your life. And I think that's where the magic happens. And so, how do we really get you to transition quicker to that vitamin mindset? I think has been really helpful for a lot of people.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. And what have you found to help transition more quickly to that?
Um, really understanding like what is at the bottom of it all, like what is the actual cause instead of the symptoms. And what I notice is a lot of people focus on symptoms. And they're like,
Mm.
well, like, I'm not happy because this happened at work. I'm not happy because these are the things that come up again and again, like in my home or with my family or with my friends. But when you start digging deeper, I'm sure you know, Sean, too, from your experience, that, there's core needs and emotions that drive a lot of the actions, and that could be caused to you, or you can cause that externally. And so being a little bit thoughtful about slow thinking, and that's what I would categorize journaling is really slowing down your cognitive to understand what's happening and surfacing from the subconscious or unconscious or even like conscious level to do the deeper work. I think that's really vital. But frankly, I don't think a lot of people even know that is a thing to do. Uh, you know, in the US, the world at large, I think introspection is um, sometimes a privilege, to be honest. It takes time, it takes effort, but also it feels like a nice to have for a lot of people. And so I wonder how to really shift the narrative from this is a nice to have thing to do to catapult yourself to the next level to I really want you to be the best version of yourself, kind of like what you said. And this is necessary. This is a must.
Yeah. I think another piece there is that it can be uncomfortable to
Mhm.
sit with yourself. It can be uncomfortable to slow down, right?
Exactly.
I think the kind of default in the way that the world works today is that there's just so much stimulation out there, right? Social media, TV shows, I don't know, like tons of emails or pings on anything, right? So it can be really, really easy just to hop from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and constantly keep your attention externally to the point where it even feels foreign to focus on yourself,
Mhm.
right? So that part, just the unfamiliarity of it will make it uncomfortable. But then there's the other layer of it where, if there are emotions that are being sort of repressed or, purposefully not brought into awareness because they're uncomfortable to deal with, that process of slowing down is more likely to, create that agitation. And so, yeah, I think it's a challenging thing to like get somebody to want to do,
Mhm.
because it can be profoundly uncomfortable and so different from what we're patterned necessarily to do. So I think it's one of those things you only really see on the other side of it. It's like kind of like going to the gym, right? It's like it's not comfortable necessarily to go on a run or work out, right? But you feel good afterwards and you start to realize that it impacts your life in other areas in positive ways as well, right? It allows you to be more present, allows you to feel more capable and all those sorts of things, right? So it's from what the experiences that you have after doing it that motivate you to do it rather than in the moment where you're like, oh, I could look at the next TikTok video or
Mhm.
I could journal, right? In that moment, your mind might be telling you, oh, I just keep scrolling, right?
Right.
But yeah, so it's a tough thing. I'm curious if anybody has the answer to this. But yeah.
It's an ongoing TBD.
Hmm.
um, yeah. And so you've gone through this journey of self discovery, but now you're allowing others to discover themselves through the work that you do day in and day out. If you were to speak to Sean in his 20s or Sean when he was a teenager, what advice would you give to your younger self and also people who are in the middle of a pivot?
Yeah, I'd say just don't sell yourself short.
Mm.
Um, Honestly, I think that's what it is. Like a lot of things can come from lack of commitment. A lot of I've had a lot of periods where I've like lacked belief in myself or commitment or whatever it is, and kind of like half do things or have like a feeling that I don't explore because I'm like maybe it's not right or whatever it is, self doubt. And the thing is like all of those things get in the way of the most important thing, which is learning. That's the most important thing, is just to learn, right? Have a growth mindset, go into it ready to be humbled and commit yourself to it to try to learn as quickly as possible. That's really the most valuable thing you can do. And think about it like in a way of like, also, how can I become the most fully expressed version of myself? Right. And I think that's one of the most beautiful journeys of life, really, because every single person is a little bit different. The unique combination of things that lead to me feeling fully expressed are going to be different than what that feels like for you, and that's based off of the tapestry of your life and right your psychology and biology and everything like that. And so there's like a unique expression that for each one of us. And I think a lot of times we sell ourselves short by trying to fit into the mold of something else, right? Going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of losing oneself in the pursuit of belonging or meeting the expectations or whatever it is of other people. There's so much time that is wasted, I think, in trying to do that. And or so much time that I wasted in trying to do that. And so yeah, don't sell yourself short, prioritize learning and growth and commit to it.
Amazing. I love that advice. And Yeah, I think this conversation allowed me to kind of also look back and see, okay, like, were there little tidbits when I was younger that allowed me to get a preview or a teaser of what's to come? And I feel like you've really honed in on that for your journey and in your career and in your personal life. And I would love to see if you'd be open to describing how they can access Rosebud if anyone is
Yes,
interested.
of course. Yeah. So you can find us at rosebud.app on any browser or in the App Store on iOS App Store or Google Play. Just search for Rosebud, and hopefully we're the first thing that pops up, and you can download and use it right away.
Well, thank you so much for your insight, your wisdom, telling your story, Sean.
Thank you. I appreciated the conversation, and yeah, it's a different one that I've usually done, but it's really a nice one.
Yes. Thanks, Sean.